being the cycle breaker. I think that there's this phase that happens where you know better, but you can't do better. It's like you notice the pattern and then you notice yourself reacting the same way or leaning for the same coping mechanism. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like that's such a normal part of their journey, but when we know better, we automatically think like, but I should be doing better, and we can be harsh, right, with ourselves. Welcome back to the Christian Healing Podcast. We have a part 2 with Adri. If you guys haven't listened to part 1, you guys know I'm so big on authenticity, and I feel like that is so important for first gens. There's so much juiciness that we didn't tap into as children, I feel, because we had to be little adults, a lot of us. And I think her story is such a beautiful example of that, of how important it is to allow yourself to experience who you really are, and who you're meant to become, despite what others may think. So please go listen to part 1. But Adri, I'm really excited because part 2 is where you get to kind of flex your muscles and show us your Latina therapist knowledge. So first, welcome. Thank you so much for coming for part 2. I'm excited. I'm going to let you lead. I'm going to take a backseat as a learner. So feel free to take it away.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me for part 2. It was beautiful to be able to share more of like my personal side. I was sharing with you that it's not usually where I gravitate. And so this is like the part where I shine, because it is safer to be in my brain than to be in my heart at times in the public, right? Yeah. I'm comfortable being in my heart, in my intimacy, in my private space. So thank you for that safe space to hold my corazoncito de pollo, porque sí se pone sensible sometimes. And let's see. So I'm Adri Rodriguez, she, ella. I'm a licensed psychotherapist here in California. I am an educator, a professor in grad school for future therapists. I am a community builder and a podcaster. And this season of life, where I'm at is that I'm finding that I'm a señora. I'm going to be turning 42 soon. So this is also like something that has changed for me. Like, I'm a señora. So I finally feel that I have enough life wisdom to match my education and be like, you know what? Both of them are relevant. For a long time, I felt that it was like my educational, that's like what people were interested in. And that's what people wanted to hear. Let me teach. And I love teaching. And now I'm realizing that actually my gift is in the fact that my work and my story are so interrelated and so intertwined that it allows me to access the work that I do with such depth of compassion without hijacking, of course, my clients' experience, because their experiences and their histories are sacred and are theirs. But I know that many people nowadays come and seek me out as a therapist because they want that relatability, right? Like, I don't have to explain to you what Latino culture is. And it's like, I think I get what you're saying. I understand it in a way because of my history. I want to understand in your history, right? So it's very important for those of you looking for a therapist that has that bridge into your story, that we are not magicians and that also our pain sometimes is very different. Can we understand it? Can we relate? Absolutely, right? But we want to hold that space for our clients. And so in grad school, I teach therapists to do this work of generational healing and to think about family systems and how anxiety, coping skills, gifts, but also weights get passed down from one generation to another. And the gift and the opportunity that many of us have, that if we stop and slow down and figured out what's going on with us and with our families, that we have the potential to stop cycles that are not healthy, that are not serving us, and that we have the opportunity to build something fresh and new that other people can get to benefit from. And so that is at the heart of my work, is that I know it gets better, but it gets better when you really understand and when you get to choose. And that's what generational healing is for me, is choice. I understand where I come from. I honor where I come from, but I get to choose what goes forward with me from those things. I think and I leave behind the things that are not serving me individually, or also not serving my family or the family that I aspire to build. One, so that I can feel better, because I don't want to be carrying all these things that are not mine anymore. But two, because I hope to be the ancestor that people look back to and say, dang, she did that, right? Thank you, ancestor, because I don't got to do that anymore. So that is generational healing for me, is that opportunity that we have in the present moment to address our pain with the opportunity to heal back with compassion, knowing that we can't change the past, but also be able to bring that lens of understanding to the past, and then the hope for the future, for a better future.
Wow. Okay, so you're doing amazing work out there. That's so cool. And I feel
love
so
it.
honored that, yeah, that we get to talk to you and get some of, like, gain some of that knowledge. I think one thing that came to mind is, like, if we can talk about what is generational trauma, and then how does it get, like, what does it mean for it to be passed down? Before we maybe head into, like, the awareness and the shifting of it. Because I think when I first started to get into healing, as a non-therapist, I think it was very clear to me, maybe like alcoholismo, let's say, like if someone is an alcoholic, then maybe they grow up seeing their dad drink. And so then now I drink to cope. And so that's how it gets passed down. But what I've realized as I've opened my mind up and, gotten further into my journey is there's so many other versions of generational trauma. It's not only like maybe clear cut things like that. It could be the way that you see the world, the way that you cope with things, the way that you relate to others, go about your life. So I feel like it's so vast. So maybe like throwing in a few examples and then we can go from there.
So generational trauma is sort of like a newish thing in the mainstream, but it really got investigated more from like an academic perspective around the children and the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, right?
Okay.
What the research at that point showed is that with the question that they had is like, why the grandchildren and the children of Holocaust survivors, are they struggling with mental health issues, with alcoholism, with not everybody, but a group of them, right? Like all of this also, maybe I start with say, a lot of these things are generalization. So take what fits and leave what doesn't. And I'm just going to speak from my background and my knowledge. Doesn't have to be what you abide by, right? So what we saw and what they saw at that point is that there was like a confusion as to why were this next two generations who were safe, who were okay, who had more resources, why were they struggling? And that's where this idea of just like, wait, do the experiences of the generations before impact people and how, right? And that's where that investigation came. So what we know about generational trauma is that, yes, at times it's going to be that direct. Grandpa was an alcoholic, dad is an alcoholic, I'm struggling with alcoholism, right? Like sometimes it's going to be that direct. But for example, there could be a more indirect way. In my case, for example, growing up in a war, what happens to an adult that is parenting during a war, right? They may experience hyperanxiety. They may be scared. They may be depressed. They may be coping through substances. They may experience irritability, anger that then leads to domestic violence, right? We know that when people are experiencing a collective trauma, historical trauma, or just trauma in their personal lives, something changes, especially when we don't address it. And what we do is that we start coping the best way that we can. And generally our coping mechanisms are the mechanisms that we've seen role model from the generation before. So alcohol would be an example of, for many in our families, it's not that we just like to drink and party, is that we have seen alcohol as a resource to access our feelings. Para llorar. Everybody has that tío that when they drink, they are hugging everybody and they're like, I love you, I'm sorry, right? What alcohol is doing there is that it's allowing access to feelings that otherwise don't have a place to be, right? But then that alcoholic that is coping through using alcohol gets home and the children are watching this and they don't think this is fun. They don't think it's cute. They think this is scary, right? So now your coping skill that you are using to cope with your own life and with your own past and with the way that you were parented by also likely people that were traumatized is now creating an unsafe environment for the children in that home. And by default, then there is some impact. May or not be alcoholism directly, but it could be when my dad comes home drunk, everybody's got to be quiet. La mamá pone los niños en el cuarto. It's just like trying to like distract the dad, right? And the kids, the oldest kid is like at the door listening, is putting headphones, is turning on the TV. And so what are we seeing now? hyper anxious kids that then grow up and be like, oh, I can read the room really well. Yeah, like, did you grow up in a home where your environment was unstable and you had to be hyper aware so that you could survive? Like, that makes sense, right? And so not all of the things that get passed down are necessarily bad, but what I advocate for as a generational healing specialist is that I want you to wonder how these gifts got developed for you, and are those the gifts that you want to continue to pursue or to own, especially when they were formed from places of a lot of pain.
Okay.
Right? So if my grandparent experienced something really scary, something really traumatic, poverty, immigration, it doesn't have to be like body autonomy related trauma to be trauma. Trauma is an experience that dysregulated you and that you did not have a way to cope through, and that now has left a legacy of symptoms, right? We have the abuelitas talking about the nervios, drinking a cup of tea, right? Como que si el tecito te va a quitar toda la historia que trajiste, right? In our grandparents, we hear stories about robaron a mi abuelita, like she got stolen. My grandpa, who was 30 years old, came one day and took this 12-year-old and made her his wife. That's trauma, right? And we love these people, so it's really hard to reconcile sometimes that the stories are also interwoven with a lot of pain. So observing and examining our generational trauma requires the capacity to hold the nuance of the both and, that people are doing the best that they can, and also they, in that process, are causing harm, right? And so if my abuelita is a 12-year-old girl who is raising now 9 children by the time she's 23, right? Because every year on the year she's pregnant, that 12-year-old was never equipped to be a parent, and therefore her children may have been impacted one way or another. And so then here you are wondering why your mom shuts down, why your parents fight, why they are acting out in ways that seem incomprehensible to you. Well, that's generational trauma, my friends. They were parented by parents who had their own traumas, and then they parented you through a trauma lens that they didn't understand. And unfortunately, that got passed down. And now you're experiencing anxiety, you're experiencing depression, you're experiencing feeling insecure, not worthy. And so likely, if you are not feeling well nowadays, we can track it back to see how this pattern got developed and passed down. And that's why generational healing is so powerful, because when we become self-aware, then we get to decide, is that coping skill for me? Was that coping skill developed in a healthy way? And if not, what are the other options? And so it brings a lens of curiosity, but also of hopefulness, that just because things have been this way for a long time, they don't have to continue to be this way.
Yeah. Wow. Do you think, like, I'm thinking some people, for example, let's say you mentioned our grandparents and then our parents. I think some people go their whole lives without changing it, right? Like, it's kind of like, así soy, like, me tienes que aguantar como soy, si me quieres, whatever. Like, ya no voy a cambiar. I've heard that from adults in my life. Like, yo ya soy así, ya no voy a cambiar. What do you think marks a difference between, like, them and those of us that are like recognizing and looking around like, whoa, I think I want different, like, do you think it's by chance, by safety, by education? Like, what causes that?
I think it is a variety of things. Even the fact that we're having these conversations and these clips on social media and podcasts, like our podcast, are generationally something that is causing a wave that is new for us therapists, right? Because how many times a week will there be a client that is like, I saw this on TikTok, and I'm not going to be like, TikTok doesn't have good educational. No, I'm like, what did you see? How did that resonate with you? What did it bring up? Right. And so I think aspect one potentially could be curiosity. Why are people talking about this stuff? Like, is this not normal? Like, oh, that person, if you saw my first episode, I cried, right? And right now I'm talking like really brain and really like contained. What? Yeah. How does she do those two things, right? And so I think there is like a lot of curiosity sometimes that sparks that opening. I think as a second factor, something that I see with my clients is que están cansados. I am so tired of not feeling well. I'm tired of not understanding what's happening. I have come to believe that somehow it's my fault that I'm feeling this way because no tengo las pilas, no tengo las ganas. I don't have the self-motivation, right? So a lot of people blame themselves, and that self-blame is like what's leading them to say like, I need something and I don't know what it is. And that's how many people come into the space. I think that, in as a resilience factor, so when people experience trauma, for them to not be traumatized out of that trauma, because not every trauma becomes a post-traumatic stress disorder or a pathologized reaction to a trauma. What the biggest protective factor is, does that person have one safe person in their life that they can lean onto after they experience that trauma? That will significantly improve the outcomes. Like if you're in a car accident, if you experience a robbery, if you're watching the news and you're experiencing vicarious trauma, reach out to someone and talk to them and normalize and make space for this. And that in itself, community belonging, is going to be a source of resilience so that those experiences don't get, no se te queden pegadas, right? But many of us didn't have adults that were safe and accessible to explain the world to us, to say, this is what's happening. The feelings that you're having are normal, right? In fact, what we maybe sometimes see is that these big things are happening in our homes and we're not supposed to talk about it. Everybody goes about their business. A big blowout happened, and the next morning everybody wakes up like nothing happened, right? Yeah. We experience actually a lot of trauma responses many times because we haven't had adults that were there for us. And so sometimes people that are coming into these healing journeys are looking for a companion. And that, for me, that's a role that I see myself as a psychotherapist. I am a companion in people's journey that just knows a bunch of stuff. Right. And so it's like if we're going the road, you're driving, my client is always in the driver's seat, but I may say, hey, I have this map and it says that if we go through this route, we're going to get there like 3 minutes faster. What do you think? Should we change route or do we stay? Right. My job as a companion is to notice, to pay attention, to connect the parts of the story that you're sharing with me, to say, do you know why you want to stay in this main road and not take the side street? I think it is because when your dad was driving, he did not feel safe enough to go in little side streets because sometimes bad things happen in those little side streets. But guess what? This safe street is kind of vetted. I've walked through it. I've been through there. I know the people that walk through there, and that street is kind of safe. Would you want to try it? Right. So my job a lot of the times is not to like give you the answers and to like advise you even. My job is to say, I know things that can help you put the story together, but ultimately it's your choice to decide where do you go. And I'm going to ride with you no matter what. If you want to keep riding in the same old road, no judgment here, but I'm going to maybe ask some questions like, like what made it scary? Like, why didn't you turn that way? Like that seemed like a good idea, but like, no judgment, curiosity, like what happened there, right? And so it is through this process of understanding not only ourselves, but then my job is to then keep track of like, oh, but you said this about your mom and this and this and that, and your abuelita, da da da. Okay, could that be connected while you're taking this road? And then actually, if we think about it, your parents immigrated y se vinieron por tierra y casi se los secuestraron and this bad thing happened. Oh, that makes sense why they act that way. So we don't want to judge them. We want to understand them. But that makes sense where that comes from. And what do you know about your grandparents and how they raised your parents, right? So me, in my job, I'm like a story keeper. I'm a story tracker. And my job is to be putting this entire story kind of like on the table for a person to like look at it and say, wow, I never thought about it that way. That is like a very common thing that I hear, right? It's like, I never thought about it that way. And it is that sense of companionship that doesn't only have to come from a therapist, but the thing that maybe makes therapy different is that we are taught a set of lenses to which we look at stories from. For me, my lens is psychodynamic, which means the childhood experiences that we had inevitably impact the now. For me, it's a person-centered. What are your goals? What is your vision of life? What is your hope and dreams? Because I want to ride with you and I'm going to cheerlead you through that. My other lens is mindfulness. In this present moment, when you're overwhelmed, when your emotions are all over the place and your buttons in your dashboard are flashing, what we need is to take a deep breath, because when we're overwhelmed, we are not going to do our best thinking, our best answering, our best feeling, our best talking, our best problem solving. So let's slow down, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
the difference in therapy, we have to do 3,000 hours of supervised experience after we go to grad school. So
Wow.
this is like a very intense process where we're not learning to heal and cure people. We're learning to accompany people and to bring a perspective to what they're experiencing and offer that experience as a, what do you think? And then people make decisions about how to take that in.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. Yeah, so I think as people, so maybe like I love the idea of a freeway, right? Oh, well, my parents always take that freeway, so I always take that freeway. And so it's then having um the invitation to look at it from a different way, or to bring in different factors, like, oh, what did you notice you have a different car and we're in a different, like, so it's like bringing in different items. So do you think, like, or what do you see more? Is it people that are conscious of the generational trauma, or that maybe are tired of something or bring something to the table, and then it's like a look back of like, oh, what is this tied to? I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah,
but
no, that makes sense. I think it's a little bit of both, but maybe in general, I would say that people who start their healing journeys, at least in my observation with me, they're coming to me because they see the lens, but they have yet to develop it for themselves, right? And that's what the
mm,
companionship and the help that we provide as therapists is, right? That it is
okay.
to be able to help people start naming the why they're not feeling it, or why, they're feeling X, Y, and Z. But I think with this new generation, and especially my Gen Zers and my TikTokers, and like the clients are like sending me a TikTok, it's like, I want to talk about this in therapy next time, right? um, I am seeing more people now come in, and it doesn't have to be age wise, younger people, but there is a way that technology has given us this access to ask questions and to hear stories of people that
Mm,
are going through similar journeys and that maybe are experiencing similar or different things than you. And so I'm seeing like both, but it is very different, like technology and access to telehealth. For example, I have clients all the way from Southern California to the border of Oregon, right? Like I have,
mm,
as a person in Sacramento, before I could only have access to my people in Sacramento. Now my network is so much wider, not because there's not enough
okay.
people in Sacramento that could use my support, but now there is just access and the possibility of seeing more therapists that, like me, are doing work that is decolonized, meaning that we are relying back into our ancestral practices, that we are
Mm,
depathologizing. We're moving away from you're ill or you're sick. We're saying you're not well
mm,
because the world is not well, right? That doesn't mean that you
mm-hmm,
have a problem. We are now seeing more therapists that are on social media providing this educational content, and healers that are providing educational content that are saying, did you know that you could get better? Did you know that there is ways to carry this differently if you do some work, right? And so there is like a societal shift. When I went to grad school, I
mm,
graduated from grad school in 2009. I
mm-hmm,
was told ongoingly, ¿vas a trabajar con locos? Are you going to work with crazy people?
mm,
Like, terapia es para locos, right? Therapy is just for people that are crazy, that are struggling. And I have seen in my own growth as a therapist a societal shift from only certain type of people go to therapy. Not to say that there's still not stigma. There is a lot of stigma still and much more work that we need to do. But there is an openness. And I think moments like this and people like you who are opening up these conversations are really contributing in destigmatizing that not feeling well inside and encouraging people
mm,
to ask questions, and to
mm-hmm.
investigate a little bit more.
I see. Ooh, that's so cool. Yeah, you're so right. Like, there's different waves that maybe like our parents, there wasn't the technology to have access to that, right? Or to create those awakening moments. Like for them, even like there was no phones at some point, right? So it was like only what I get exposed to at work, only what I get exposed to in my family. And even from part 1 and 2, like we've learned too, as people, we don't always access the reality of what's happening to us, right? So then if only the highlight gets shared, only the top layer gets shared, then we're actually like basing, or they were basing a lot of their stuff um with kind of like a lack of depth, it lacked the real or the other part of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um So interesting.
As you say that, what comes up to mind is like when we're worried about roof over our heads, when we are worried about putting food on our table, when we're worried about getting caught by ice, when we're worried about, like feelings feel like such a privilege. Who has time to cry and to be depressed and to be, of course, I'm going to rely on my chamomile tea and my, like this like little respiración, or voy a rezar. I'm going to lean on the church and I'm going to lean on prayer, right? Because sitting with this, especially as it's still going on with you, it can be very, very scary for people, right? And so part of, I think, this work that we're doing in this moment, for example, is just saying, hey, like there's a possibility that maybe there are some things that you haven't explored that explain why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And if you wanted help, hey, you got two people here that could potentially help you understand. And also, ultimately, is beyond understanding, is for me, is living a value-driven life, making value-driven actions. Who are you? What are you about? And how do you make decisions every day, from the little ones to the big ones, that are in alignment with that value, that those values are your North Star? That no matter what the thing that comes in front of you is, because we can't predict it, but when we know our values, we know that good things are going to come because we begin to trust ourselves, right? So it is like that, building trust in ourselves so that we can make decisions that are grounded in our values, in our reality of where we come from, but also honoring and having compassion. We can be harsh on the people that don't have access to healing, or that they choose to be toxic or whatever. And I think that for me, it's important to remind myself that it's a privilege to be in this position, to have this much access to myself, because I'm not worrying about how to put food on my table. And I think it is important that we have compassion to why many of our families haven't done this work, haven't been able to believe in this work, because their resources internally have been really limited for a long time, for generations even.
Yeah. And I think even maxed out, like in terms of energy, if they're doing like laborious, I don't know if laborious is a word. Is it a word?
I don't know. But
labor intense work,
Trabajo pesado.
Sí, trabajo duro. No, but yeah, like to those, if we have a certain amount of energy and it's all used towards our job, we don't come home, like maybe their minds are like shut down, like I'm just trying to watch TV, numb out, or ya no me vengas con tus problemas, lo que sea, like I'm exhausted, So it's so true. Like, I think, I say like first gens, I think we, or as this generation, we're doing this delicate dance, where we're holding our parents' stories, our family stories, and our story, and it's this ongoing pull and tug of like understanding and empathy, and then boundaries and well-being. And I imagine, you thank you for bringing in like the current situation, because I think that's present in everyone's mind. I think it's going to be ongoing. Like, it's not going to be, there isn't going to be, how do I say it? It's not all or nothing. And I think that's actually a disservice to us, because sometimes we think, well, I already set that boundary, I can't talk to that person, or I already said this and this, but there is a need for community. There is a need for family. There is a need for safe spaces. So I think we're going to have to constantly juggle, like, where are we at? How much capacity do we have? Can we bring this person back in? Do we have to push them a little away? Right? Like, do you think that's kind of
absolutely
realistically, like, it feels like that's what we need to do, as opposed to like, no, I'm only surrounding myself by love and light, because that's not always accessible to us. Like, always.
Absolutely. I mean, like, recently I was having a conversation with someone and they brought up the topic of forgiving your parents, right? And if you heard my episode 1, that's a very sensitive, it was not a therapy conversation, it was a personal conversation. And in that personal conversation, when they said, well, my parents are people and I want to forgive them, and I could feel my entire body red, like, because you don't have to forgive your parents. You don't have to be nice to people that hurt you. You don't have to. You can if you want to. But again, like, that's the word, is the having to versus wanting to, right? Can you be in relationship with people who there are limitations and who you can show compassion and understanding for where the limits are? Yeah. But does that mean that you have to continue to agree to be in environments that are toxic, unhealthy, harmful to you? You don't have to. You get to make that choice. And it's judgment free. Everybody, every single one of us is going to choose to interact with our pain points in very different ways. And that's why it's healing cannot be a one size fits all, because it is going to be so dependent on those values that drive you. If for you, a value that is incredibly important, centering your life, is family, well, we're going to have to work around how do you stay in community and family with people who are not always showing up at their best for you, or who are not creating an environment that is healthy for you. But if that's what you want, right, my job is to support you in that and create the buffers and the container and the preparation for the boundaries, the talks, right, so you can show up to a space that has the potential to hurt you and to re-trigger you, right? But if you're going to go there blindly, then what's going to happen is that you're going to lose your shit a little bit. You're going to get angry. You're going to yell. You're going to, right? And so it's about making this informed choice and this conscientious choice about, if this is what I want and I understand what that is, how do I prepare myself to show up in a way that still honors me and that centers me while maintaining this value of family, right? And there may be pressure sometimes from the outside to say, yeah, pero ya sabes tu mamá cómo es, ya sabes tu papá, you know, esto, lo otro. Yeah, no, I know. And that's why, because I still want to be in relationship with them, I may have to put some more stronger boundaries around this relationship so that I can, because ya sé cómo son, because I know how they are. It's exactly why I want to prepare myself to, you know, to strengthen that toolbox of tools that are going to help me get through the tough days, the tough interactions, right? And then you can always come back to my office and we'll talk about it and be like, that must have sucked. I'm so sorry. Yeah. But you did really well in this part, in this part, in this part. How do you feel? Do you think that you would go to another family party? Do you think that you want to keep hanging out there? How do you feel about the distance that you have right now, right? Investigate, because not all boundaries and not all decisions that we made have to stay rigid. There is an art to flexibility, but a flexibility that is not from the outside. Be flexible. It's a flexibility that is informed by what we know about ourselves, but the healing and the hurts that we carry in ourselves, and then by those values that drive our actions.
One thing that I have noticed, so this can go for both like family and interactions like the ones you're mentioning, and I think internal, in the process of being the cycle breaker, I think that there's this phase that happens where you know better, but you can't do better. It's like you notice the pattern and then you notice yourself reacting the same way or leaning for the same coping mechanism. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like that's such a normal part of their journey, but when we know better, we automatically think like, but I should be doing better. And we can be harsh, right, with ourselves.
Yeah. I think for me, a part that is important to remind ourselves of our humanity. There's no way to be perfect. I know that the little person in you learned that if you're just good, and you do everything right, you're going to be safe, right? Perfectionism is rooted in safety. I want to be safe from shame. I want to be safe from harsh commentary. I want to be safe from physical violence. I want to be safe from getting mocked, right? Like, perfectionism is a great example of a coping mechanism that, on a good side, perfectionists, we are delivering good stuff constantly. We are high performers. We are high achievers. We are proud of our work. But on a negative side, perfectionism is exhausting, right? So what is the process for us to say, there are some gifts into my perfectionism, but there are also some barriers and some challenges and some weights that are no longer negotiable. So how do I weed it out, right? So part of the stuckness that many of us feel is that we think that we're just going to go from being a perfectionist to not being a perfectionist. That is way too extreme. The reality is that happens in micro changes that build upon one another, that then altogether create a new way of being, showing up, receiving, thinking, and feeling. But when we have these really big expectations, that because now I understand that, and that's another part for my intellectualizers that consume a lot of mental health material, and that intellectualize and think and think and think. Many times what's happening is that where the stuckness is in here, in the feelings, right? And people get frustrated. Why do we got to keep talking about the same thing over and over, right? Well, we keep talking about it because it still needs space. It still needs attention. It still needs time, right? And that can be really frustrating. And a society that we live in that is about fast rewards, that if you did not put content that was 7 seconds worth, people are going to scroll by, right? That if our meal is not good enough for Instagram, we're not going to post it. If our fit is not good, right? We live in a society that it is rooted in capitalism, I think, that it is rewarding fast, quick, now. But healing didn't happen overnight. Like hurting didn't happen overnight. So your healing is not going to happen overnight. It is going to take time. And part of the art of talk therapy and why we talk about these things over and over is because we're allowing parts of ourselves that are not the logic. The logic knows, of course, that happened, right? That's here. But here it's just like, it happened and it hurts. And I don't know why it still hurts. And I don't know what I need to do for it to stop hurting. Processing. And so many times, clients or like people that I work with would be like, but I already talked about that. It's like, but your heart wants to talk about it again. What might be different today? Right? But I just told you all this and I don't know why did I tell you all of this. And it's just like, because you want me to get to know you and you want to get to know these parts too, it sounds like, because you're saying you never put words into this. I'm the first person that you're sharing. Wow, like that is incredible that you trust me to say this, but look at the courage that you had for you to hear that story out loud, right? So the process of becoming, awakening, the word that you really ground yourself into your work, it's a process. A mí si me despiertan en la mañana, if I wake up at 8:30 and I got to do something at 8:45, I'm going to be like, what? Like, I'm not a morning person. I need like a good 2 hours to get into my groove, right? And so this process of awakening, this process of becoming, sometimes it takes a different rhythm. There is the morning people that they shoot off the bed into working out. I could never, like, absolutely not, because my pace is different. So we have to be careful that when we're hearing stories like this, or when we are admiring people that have gotten to be where you aspire to be, that we are not measuring ourselves by those standards, because they may just be morning people and you're not. They may just X and you're not. And can you be okay with who you are instead of continuously comparing yourself to what should be based on what other people are seeing? And I think that is a big pain point and a barrier and a challenge for many people, is to be patient. To be patient with the process and to be kind to the parts of you that are desiring to be seen, even if your brain doesn't understand why the heck the story from when I was 6 years old is relevant today because I'm 42. But if you just heard the other episode that we just recorded, that 6-year-old will always live inside of me. That 16-year-old will always live inside of me. And sometimes they throw tantrums and sometimes they act out, because what is triggering in this present moment is something so old and something that I experienced or that you experienced before your brain had the cognitive capacity to think it through. So when adults are trying to think through things that kids experience purely in feelings, right, there is a disconnect, and that is what takes time.
Yeah. Ooh. And I think too, like, those versions of us, for many of us, were never fully seen. And what I mean by that is that I think a lot of us grew up with busy parents, or parents that like por encimita met our needs, because they had so much on their plate or they weren't present. And we don't realize that these versions of us, these younger versions of us, they were never fully seen, because even when we were experienced, it was the mask that we put on, right? So we talked about, like, kind of you started masking at age 8. I'm okay, I'm good, I got me, I got everyone. So that wasn't you fully. That was the version of you thought you needed to be. So who has experienced you fully? Not even yourself, not others, and sometimes not even yourselves. So I just wanted to name that, because I think like that's at the root of what I see, and maybe like part of my purpose is like, I want your inner child to feel seen, because they've never actually been seen sometimes, no one had the time or the patience or the bandwidth to do so. And so that's why sometimes you need to go back and back and back. Porque
Yep.
imagine how many days and years you felt unseen, you felt unheard. Your emotions weren't even fully yours because you either minimized them or, you know, like took them under this invisible, but like Santa sack, you know, that could hold so much. Porque nunca había espacio para eso.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I love that you're saying that, because that is also generational trauma, right? We have the very obvious, very negative ways that we cope and that we hurt ourselves and things like that, or this like very obvious bad things that happen to you. But the experience of going a lifetime, a childhood with that being seen can be traumatic for some people. And some people that come into therapy, right, they may be, or they are going into their healing journeys, they may be like, but I don't need help. My parents don't abuse me. My parents are nice. Like, they never raise their voice. They never hurt me. My grandparents are really nice. Like, my family gets along. Why do I feel like I feel inside, right? Like, that actually can be really confusing to a lot of people. But that, like what you name, is when a family is in poverty, when a family is unavailable, when a parent has two jobs because they're undocumented and they're getting paid under the table below minimum wage, the parent is going to show up at night with a 6-pack of beer or to cook and to do laundry and to do homework. Where is there time for you to be seen? And that can be in itself a traumatic experience that creates a narrative that you're not worthy of being seen, that you're not worthy of taking space, that you're not worthy of getting attention, right? And that for some people can be experienced as trauma. Again, from the earlier part that I said, when we don't have an adult that is saying, hey, I'm so sorry, I haven't had time to check in with you all week because I've been at work. How was your week? How are your friends doing? Like, tell me all about it. I know that in many of our immigrant poverty, non-English speaking, like where people are just surviving, our parents didn't even have space to ask themselves how they were doing, to regulate their own emotions. And so when we're dysregulated, that's going to impact us, right? So I think that you're kind of tapping into a crowd that may be wondering, like, why don't I feel good? Why am I struggling? Why do I feel unhappy? When nothing bad happened to me, even experiences that were not ill-intended or that were meant to be harmful, because in that example, your parents were working. That's why they weren't around. That's why you had to go to la vecina to be waiting for your parents to come home, or you had to go with your tia or your abuelita to take care of you because your parents are not available. They had to feed you. Of course, they were not available, but it doesn't take away that even things that are not intentional sometimes can leave a wound for people who are needing to, you know, something different than their next sibling, right? Or in families, when you see like a bunch of people unaffected, 2-3 people are super affected. Like, what happened, right? We all as humans have different needs, and those needs sometimes don't get met. And that can also be part of that wound that you're talking about.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. I know, like, I want to be mindful of our time.
We can talk about this for hours.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have so much knowledge, but I wanted to say real quick, like, in that comparison, because I feel like it's so big. Yeah, some people might be like, eso no me afectó. But we also need to be mindful that some of them might still be putting that like deep, like, you know, like it's so deep that they don't even have access to it, that they don't even think it exists in their world. But then if you maybe pay attention to how they cope or how they speak about themselves or how they think of others, like como que it starts to peek its head, está ahí, nomás que lo esconden muy bien, ¿verdad? Porque I think like sometimes it's that comparison, like I receive that comparison, like your sister never complains about it, right? Like, and you guys were raised the same. Yeah. And potentially, you know, she's not there yet. She doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe it's too painful. It doesn't mean that it didn't affect her. So I think I name it for like, if you have siblings that seem okay, or if you have other, if your pain or your whatever's trying to bubble up is once again being like shoved down, you know, like for once, believe yourself, because that is where your healing will be. You know, you can't heal yourself through others' words or validation. You can't wait to heal until someone says, oh no, yeah, you're right, it was that bad. And then be like, oh, okay, cool, then I can heal. Like, no, we need to kind of, you know, start with believing ourselves and seeing ourselves to find the roadmap to like what we need, you know. Maybe they don't need it, but we do.
Yeah. And I think that also we have to be considerate that sometimes siblings grow up in a different entire home, right? You know, our parents' experiences when you're like sometimes the eldest daughter or like the eldest son, or you might have experienced actually a lot more hardship just out of the fact that your parents maybe were younger, were inexperienced, they're figuring it out. Economically, they're in a different spot. And then by the time your sibling comes, right, it's like, and why can she go out? Why are you buying her things? How does she come? She has an iPhone at 10. You didn't buy, right? Because many times in our homes, right, each child is going to need something different, but also circumstances change. And you may literally have parented by a whole different version of parents and your siblings' experience, and which is really hard. I think it's a very hard to understand the both and that your siblings' experience may be just different than yours. And how do you honor and respect that too?
Right. Yeah. Yes. So many layers, right? Always so many layers to consider. But that's why, like you said, that's why there are people like you that bring in those layers that maybe say, hey, what about that? You haven't looked at that part, or like, let's connect these dots. So in this part, I would also love to give you some space and time to share about what you do. I mean, we have an idea now, but like where people can find you, what kind of services you offer, and then I'll ask you resource questions and we'll wrap this episode up.
Perfect. Of course. So what I do is I'm a generational healing specialist. I love to work with people who are deeply curious and ready to look at their story non-judgmentally, right? Because maybe sometimes your pain is so big that what you want is a validation that this is really hurtful and this sucks. And there's space for that. And for me, what is really exciting is also to see the opportunity that when we realize and we acknowledge and honor the pain and the anger and all these things, it does get to a point where we enters choice, right? What are you going to do with everything that you know by yourself? So for me, that generational healing is the opportunity to not only take care of myself in the present, honor my history, and also build the stepping stones for something that is coming that we cannot even possibly comprehend. Because every day that you're doing this work, you're becoming somebody's ancestor, whether by blood or by choice, by relationship, right? We are gravitating in an interconnected way with everyone that we're around. And so for me, my work is especially exciting and beautiful when I have people that are really interested in understanding not only how do I feel better, because that is part of it, but tip of the iceberg, depth of the iceberg. Oh man, do I love me the depth of the iceberg people who allow me to accompany them through this journey, to teach them the things that I know, to offer a perspective, but ultimately to see people bring all of these things together and begin making choices that make them feel good every night they go to sleep. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything that you dream of. You didn't do your entire to-do list / wish list, right? But you know what you did? You did this, you did that, you did this, and you get to every night affirm that a better, healthier version of you is in development. And what I say to my clients, if you're listening, trying is doing. Trying is doing, because a lot of times people will be like, yeah, I got to do that. You're already doing it by the fact that we're talking about it and by the fact that you're trying to do differently. Trying is doing, right? So that's like the people that I feel most excited to understand, because there are people that are comfortable with the multi-layers and almost like the multiverse of stories, right? And so in class, maybe like a little exercise that I want to offer for people, we have a tool that is called a genogram, and it's a family tree. And in this genogram, what we do is that we track patterns 3 to 4 generations back. And so then when a person can see these patterns, and what is cool about this tool is that it's a visual tool. So you get to see, dang, alcoholism in this one, and this one, and this one, loss in this one, and this one, and this one, right? Then you get to kind of ask yourself the questions of like, how did that impact me? And I think that you don't need a therapist for, right? You can do that work initially in yourself. You may find the barriers about what do I do with this knowledge, right? And that's where we come in, the people that are the helpers, the healers, the therapists, right? But initially, what an interesting, perspective to take if any of this conversation is resonating with you. If you don't understand, how did you get to be the person that you are? Just like, do like a little family mapping.
Wow.
What are the
Yeah.
patterns? And then what do you want to do potentially with those patterns? Maybe it's time to investigate it a little bit more with a therapist. Maybe it's time to listen to some more podcasts and stories of people that have had similar traumas to see how they went about it. Not to tell you this is how you do it, but to gain inspiration and open that curiosity, right? So that's also a part of the work of like helping people create tools so that they can become the voice that I have from the outside and like teach you to do that for yourself. And I do that work with individuals who are also welcome to bring guests to therapy. I love when people bring guests to therapy because sometimes clients get into the point of stuckness where like, I don't know how to have this conversation. I don't know what to do. And so sometimes my clients invite their parents, their siblings, their significant others, not for family therapy, not for couples therapy, but for their therapy with a person of support. One set of people. So my individuals, and you're welcome to bring guests with preparation in advance because I want to be aligned with your goals. I want to make sure that we stay in tune to what your journey is and that this is not about blame or pushing like the finger wagging with your therapist right now. No, this is like for support and for healing and for growth. So one category of folks. Category two is couples in relationships, including polyamorous relationships, right? So that's my other specialty, which is relationships. Now, we talked about a whole world of a person. Now we have two worlds, sometimes three worlds, sometimes four worlds coming together to create families, right? And so in couples work, for me, what I tell people is that my job is to be an interpreter. I am an interpreter of worlds. And what I am going to be doing is saying, whoa, actually, that person just said the same thing that you said, but they said it different. Can you hear it right? So in couples work, I love helping people build bridges towards and the same process of investigating how does your childhood is showing up in your relationship. What are the wounds of parenting that you're experiencing now because of the way that you were parented? Because many couples, they don't have role models so that they can build a relationship that they want. Many times our role models, for all the reasons that we talked about, are not the role models that we need to build the lives that we want. So in couples therapy, we get to do that. We get to dream, we get to imagine, but we also get to address the way that our past and our childhood and our own individual traumas are becoming barriers for communication, for intimacy, for just being in relationship with someone. And then the third group that I work, which is also my favorite, is adult families coming to therapy, having a mom and a daughter, a set of siblings, a mom, a dad, and 3 children, adults, all adults. When you're becoming a therapist, many times we do work with children's families, but I want to be a specialist on adult families because adult families many times don't have a space for facilitated conversations that are fair and well balanced, where everybody can be heard and then everybody can become a decision maker in how do we go forward. So those are like the 3 ways that I work. I teach all of this stuff too in grad school for upcoming therapists. Family systems and sex and gender issues in therapy are my specialties. I do a lot of community work around this in Sacramento online. And now with my podcast, now that is the Entre Tías y Amiguis, is where I get to have the conversations with this hat, because I'm always in therapy hat, but I'm not psychoanalyzing you unless you're sitting in my office and we've signed consent. But the therapist hat being always with me does give me an edge to see the world a little bit different, to ask different questions, to engage with my own story differently, because in therapy, that's not the time to be talking about me. So my podcast, I get to share a little bit more of my humanity mixed with therapy and my professor hat to say, this is what's happening. This is what the theory says about it. These are some actionable tools that you can take. And so everything for me is about the possibility that if we understand where we come from, we heal the parts that are hurt, we empower the parts that sustain us and that make us courageous, then we can begin making actions that are in alignment with what we dream about, what we hope for, and who we want to be as people.
Yeah.
I love my job. I love my work. It's so exciting and so beautiful. And it is an honor. I know it's really cheesy, like what an honor, but it is such an honor to be invited into people's intimate worlds and to become, a person, because I can never become their person, but I can be a person who provides a reparative experience to be seen. And that is not work that I take just for whatever. It's like an honor, to be honest.
Yeah. And how beautiful. I think what stood out was also that you allow people to bring people. I don't think I had heard that before. I think that that's such a neat opportunity that people can have, like, hey, my friend knows me like the back of her hand, right? And maybe even in what she reflects back, you're able to then be like, ooh, like even you as their companion, as you called it, right? You get a different perspective and can bring that into your sessions with them. So cool. Well, I'm gonna, of course, put everything in the description so that people can check out your work, your services, and your podcast. So you said Entre Tías y
Amiguis.
Amiguis, okay,
which is my
podcast.
gender neutral way of saying, like, I have some amazing women friends, but I also have people who are from the queer community, people who do not identify as female, that are also part of my family. And then there is some tios and amiguis there that are male and that are fighting actively towards a new version of being men and being outside of heteronormative standards. And so that's the goal with the amiguis, being more open to folks who may not be obviously the folks that maybe I'm in community with, but everyone's welcome. Everyone's story has, something that we can learn from.
What is a powerful book or movie that either you reread or that you watched it once and it impacted you, and that kind of relates to what we've been talking about today?
It is a A24 movie about a Korean woman who is an immigrant and who reconnects with a childhood friend. I will give you the name for the show note because I cannot remember what it's called. And a book that I read a couple years ago is called The Midnight Library. And it is a book about the roads not taken and an opportunity for this person in the book to examine as they're like in the brink of, do I stay in this world or do I go away from this world from a mental health perspective? They get like this in between moment to go to this midnight library and to pull books where the written story of the alternative life that they could have lived is there. Wow. And at the end of the book, they come back to realize that this is the life that we have, and though the alternative universe could have had millions of possibilities, all we have at the end of the day is this life and what we do with it.
Inspiring song, or just something that, I guess an inspiring song or that gets you in a good mood, whichever you prefer.
Right now, I'm a Bad Bunny girl. So, I have my ups and downs about Bunny. Debí tirar más fotos. I'm also a photographer. I've been a wedding photographer, portrait photographer a long time. And so debí tirar más fotos for me, being able to, because as I mentioned in my other episode, there's this like mental lagoon sometimes of like my 6 to 16-year-old self. What I love is looking at photos and that reminder. I am a photo taker. I will go everywhere and be taking photos. I don't care. This is before even being an influencer content creator, because photos allow us to live the moment over and over again and to see it at different points of our lives from different perspectives with different eyes. And so Debí tirar más fotos is definitely like my song right now.
Favorite mindful practice? You mentioned mindfulness. So for you, what's something that you're like, this is my go-to?
Okay, so I love going into floating therapy, which is just like a little room that has about a foot of water that is filled with minerals and things to replicate the Red Sea, like in the Middle East. And so what it does is that it creates a buoyancy. You float, even if you don't know how to float and you don't want to float. And then you can turn off the light and the music, and you are just floating into this like spatial nothingness that, for me, it's like the best space to meditate, because I literally, it's like the sensory deprivation. You're there for 60 minutes, but there's no clock, there's no music, there's nothing. So you just have to surrender to being, and you can hear your heart beat. And that is not something that you can do sort of like on command in your everyday, because it requires a stillness and a quietness to be able to hear your inside. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're not scared of the dark and you want to trust and surrender to the process and you find it hard to quiet down, the fact that you're floating kind of keeps you like focus in the present moment. You're worried. So
Okay.
floating tank, highly recommend.
Ooh, okay. Quote or advice that you refer back to or love?
Be kind and compassionate to yourself and to others because we don't know what story they're
A
carrying.
journal prompt that the listeners can journal on, or a little exercise that you would recommend for them?
Mm-hmm. I would say, yes, go try to do a genogram, look it up. There is lots of YouTube videos about it. I may even make like a video about it because I think it's such a cool tool. But I would
Okay, yeah.
say to meditate, to go into like a breathing space where you maybe take like 10 breaths and get rooted in your body. And then you check in with your higher self, with your future self. Like, what do I need to do to get to you? And you ask that question to
Mm,
yourself. What do I need to do to get to you? Because what I find is that the answers live within us and we know what we got to
mm,
do, but sometimes we're not listening because it's too busy, it's too painful, it's too big. And so if you can access that future version of you who got it figured out, or that highest version of you who got it, and you seek that advice from within, I think that could be like a really powerful experiment or exercise to do with yourself. Like, ground yourself, quiet yourself down, and it's like, what do I need to do to get to you? Because the
mm.
answer will show.
Okay, I like that. And then lastly, there's a group of first gens listening. So if you had a mensajito to share with them, what would it be?
Estamos cansados. Like, if you're tired, we're going through collective times that are tough, that are triggering potentially ancestral wounds. Because if you are a child of immigrants, the current sociopolitical environment, or if you're a first gen and you're the first one doing something new, the world right now is telling us, don't. We don't want you. You don't belong. And I am here to say to them, shut up, because if anyone is proof that we can do it, it's us. And if anyone can do it, it's us for us.
Thank you so much for two
Thank you.
wonderful episodes. I feel like we learned a lot. You took us on a journey. We learned a lot. We cried, we laughed, and that's always my favorite. So thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you do, for putting your voice out there, for reclaiming your story, for all of the courage and strength that it took to be your authentic self and shine as that. Because you're beautiful, amazing. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yes, and I am so happy that you chose yourself, and that you continue to do that, because I think we get this version of you, and that is amazing. For those of you listening, please share this to whoever you think would find this helpful, for maybe people that are starting their journey, or that are like starting to talk about generational trauma. But other than that, cuídense mucho. Thank you for listening. Y like you said, girl, like, we're tired. We see you, we feel you. Descansen if you can, and build your toolbox, because we're going to be here. Aquí estamos, no nos vamos. So we need to be
Nah.
strong physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So we got to lock in. So, yeah. All right.
Yep.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.